My keys in the car, yeah. I'm just gonna put your bag up here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, I haven't.
The time is 7:06 on Monday, May 13th, 2024. I'd like to call this Environmental Advisory Committee meeting. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Virginia Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They're the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, and recognize that through Treaty 13 as well as the Williams Treaties of 1920. A shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together. That racial script in us. That's just. Okay, so could I have an approval of the agenda? Thank you. Are you leaving the agenda?
Or were you?
We need to be.
Oh, sure. Kristen. Kristen. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I can't seeing none. I'd like to have a mover and a seconder for receipt of the minutes from April 15th. Thank you. Don't have my glasses on. Okay, great. Are there any comments on the minutes? Seeing none. With the committee's consent, we have requests for delegation. Maybe. I'd like to have an approval of the delegation request. I need a mover and a seconder. And I can't. Sean, thank you, Sean. And who is delegating? Jason.
Good.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Do you want to stand whatever your thoughts?
Sure. I'll be right now.
Okay, last time I saw you was at the rec.
Yes.
In the gym, in the fitness center.
Yeah, so it's nice to see you again. Hope to see you more often, actually.
I'm trying.
Yeah. So my name is Jason. I'm a member of the Climate Action Newmarket Aurora Committee. And we have an event going on at the end of the month. It's a Climate Action Town Hall for members of the community. You may have seen the poster that's posted out the front of the lobby. We'll have a speaker there to talk about one of the three topics. I believe it'll be conscious consumer. But the other two topics will be more like a roundtable where we encourage the attendees to discuss certain questions that we'll post. So it's meant to be more open and give people opportunity to participate as opposed to being lectured. Yeah, we hope this is an invitation. We hope you have time to attend as local residents and
Thank you.
members of the committee. Yeah.
Could you say the date and time again?
Yep, it's May 29th from 7 to 9. The Newmarket Legion, which is up on Bayview, near the main Newmarket downtown, I guess. And that is my first delegation, but won't be my last. We're working on getting a presentation for the town to sign a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. We're working on Newmarket right now, but we hope to get Aurora involved.
Would you explain what that is?
Well, it's, so a couple years ago, I believe the town did declare a climate emergency, which is lovely. I think that's great. But the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty has several pillars that go along with it. It's not law binding, but it will help move the town in sort of an area where more conscious of how we develop going forward. But we'll lay it all out probably in the fall. I believe that'll probably be the next committee meeting, as you guys are probably off during the summer, if I'm not mistaken.
We are.
Yeah, so this will be the last one before the summer, right?
There's one more
Oh, there is,
in June, yeah.
in June, okay.
Yeah. June 17th? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know they were so close together. But that's great. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you for your work, the work that you do.
Thank you. I'll see you at the gym.
I'll just add to the record that you come to our meetings. Okay, well. We have a big matter for consideration. Very lengthy report from the consultants, very in-depth, very great, actually. I was just saying to someone that sometimes when I read the consultants' reports, I wonder. So, in this case, we don't. Natalie, do you want to do any introduction or?
Sure. So good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to first welcome Kaden and Patrick from Walter Fetty. They're here virtually with us tonight. They presented the findings from our draft 2024 Energy Conservation Demand Management Plan at our last meeting. That was on April 15th. So we thank them for that great presentation. Since then, we were able to provide the committee with the full draft report, and I'm hoping you all had a good read with that. As Councillor Gardner explained, there's a lot of information in that report, a lot of information that we've never collected and put together. And it's something we will be doing again in our next 5-year plan. So they're here tonight to answer any questions, take in any feedback from the full draft report, so that they can integrate it into the final draft that's going to council on June 4th, I believe. Yeah, June 4th. So it's kind of our last chance to get everyone's feedback and for us for consideration. So that might be any comments or questions that you might have. They're here to take that feedback. I know they do have to leave within the hour, so if they have to leave, I'll definitely continue taking any notes for the report. So yeah, I'd love to hear any comments, anything that surprised you or that you supported or that you were a bit disappointed with. Yeah, we're here to take it all in. I don't know, Kaden or Patrick, if you had any comments or anything, feel free to jump in or take notes.
Yeah, definitely here with open ears for any questions. Certainly it's a very detailed report, like you said. Lots of pages, lots of numbers, lots of good information, has a decent level of granularity. So I think in terms of kind of the end product, it provides an excellent roadmap for the next 5 years, and then some positioning for for the medium and long term towards the eventual long-term goals that are the most important ones, certainly given they're along the lines of net zero. So, this is, what's been outlaid in this report is not exactly what's going to happen, of course. This is taking one approach to it, which is a good approach with some resiliency and some robustness. But at the end of the day, the specifics in the medium and long term, which will be implemented, will be decided by this group and the other stakeholders in Aurora as more information presents itself as we work through the audits and studies that are recommended in the short-term 5-year program as well. So yeah, I think we're very pleased with where we got to with this effort. It started last year, quite a long time ago. So a lot of effort went into getting it to where it's at today. So I think Kaden and I and Natalie and Nancy are probably quite proud of that.
Thank you. Who was the fourth person you mentioned?
Nancy,
Nancy Fleming?
yeah.
Thank you. Well, it is a long report. I should admit that I didn't go through it line by line. Especially the fleet part. Could I ask you, was there anything surprising about how Aurora is or isn't doing? Any comments? I won't write them down, just, but they're being recorded, sorry. But anything that, you do a lot of this work. So was there anything that when you looked at how we're doing with what we're doing, if there was anything that in particular of note for the committee?
I think the accomplishments over the past 5 years were certainly quite strong, and the results were some of the key results were quantifiable from a building perspective in particular. Great to see that more data has been acquired, so that was encouraging that a lot of effort has been put towards achieving more data acquisition, because without data, it's hard to make informed decisions. So I think strong accomplishment by the town to make sure that data is getting in order for long-term tracking. But overall, in terms of where you're at today, certainly nothing earth-shattering with your current status. Not too bad in terms of effort. I think what we expected is that buildings, like the building portion, would dominate the effort required because it is 2/3 of the emissions, and that kind of holds true. So having significant focus on buildings and fleet over the next 5 years in really understanding that stood out. But nothing alarming by any means when we were working through this. I'm not sure if Kaden or Natalie had anything to add to that.
Thank you. Kaden, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, not really anything to add. One thing that I saw with the town of Aurora, which I've also seen with a few other municipalities, is just, being aware of the impact of adding more buildings to the mix, because it's always that challenge of reducing GHG emissions while growing as a municipality. But that's, a very common experience. And I think that the town has done a good job with the actions they've taken and the plans they have to have like a, sustainable building standard to make sure that they're sort of offsetting that as much as possible.
Thank you. Natalie, is there anything you want to add at this time to that? Or is there anything in the data surprise you?
No, I mean, you know, since I've started, I've been quite deep into all of this topic, right? So nothing at this point surprised me. Yeah, but there were some elements that really surprised me, like the waste, collecting the waste, was information was quite difficult, harder than I thought it would be. And coming up with preliminary, you know, action items that we could do was surprisingly difficult, and still not that much going on in other municipalities that we could fall onto, which was a bit surprising. So I am looking forward to doing diving deeper into that area, and seeing what comes out of that. And because it actually was pretty significant. I think it was about 13% of our emissions was from our waste. So I mean, you know, something we can't ignore, right? So that was surprising for me. Some of the buildings not having as much of an impact as I thought they would, kind of stood out as well. I think the initiatives coming out of the fleet team also, and their willingness to pilot new projects, and their willingness to look at you know, decarbonization, that was also kind of nice. Since I've started really working mostly with facilities on their initiatives, and their data acquisition and analysis. So it was kind of nice bringing all these pieces together into one report and one analysis, and finally getting like an overview together was yeah, it was a nice process. But yeah, data collection is still very important and very much like a challenge as well. So definitely an area that can continually improve, that we're hoping to improve over the next couple of years. So, yeah.
You mentioned some of the buildings surprised you. In what way?
Yeah, well, the SARC having such a large impact, about 30%, eh, Kaden? 31%, I think it was the overall GHG impact. And then the next rec center is it like 9% or something, 10%? Like it's not even close.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere in there, like, SARC was definitely, it definitely
Yeah.
did stand out for having a large chunk of GHG emissions.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that was quite surprising, even compared to the AFLC. So, yeah, that stood out as well, for sure.
I think of the 10 to 15 buildings, SARC represented almost 50% of all GHG emissions of all buildings.
Yeah.
Somewhere between like 45 and 50%, something like that.
And that's a relatively new building, 2005. So, well, how about relative size, because it is the largest of our grad facilities.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's not, the fact that it's the largest emitter or source of our emissions doesn't mean that it's badly performing for that building. It's just relative its size and activities, right? Having the
Right.
pools and the arenas, and all the other rooms and activities and gyms and things that are happening there. Yeah, so it's not that it's performing bad per se. It's just was surprising how much more it was compared to the other rec facilities. So something to look into, right? Like
Yeah.
going forward when we're talking about retrofitting, would be an important
Yeah.
thing to look into. So,
I'd also say it's the most well-used. I mean, I'm at the leisure complex compared to the leisure fitness center compared to the leisure complex, like leisure complex is sleepy compared to the SARC, it's always hustle and bustle. Yeah, but yeah, so that would be something we could try and concentrate on,
Exactly,
getting that building.
yeah.
Does anybody have any questions on the report itself?
Just if I may have a follow-up question, through you.
Yes.
Yeah, through you, Chair. The report, do you share that back to the different departments that you have kind of been collecting data from and working with? Is that something that they will see?
Yes, absolutely. They provided all of the data and the information. They were, consulted with a few times throughout this process. They have the final draft for comments. And then going forward, they have to be implementing what's in the report, right? As long as it's feasible for that time. So yeah, they're crucial in the implementation process. Yeah. And through this report and this project, it was obvious that we need a kind of implementation committee almost within the staff with all of these divisions working together. So I think that was really positive coming out of this project. So there'll be a lot more communication amongst the divisions with the implementation process, yeah.
And of course, at the end of the day, we need money to do this, so it all depends on our budget, how important council thinks it is. They're challenging times, so
That's right,
we may not be able to move as quickly as we want to.
yeah.
Chair, if the funding comes together and the town decides on a few major pieces like the pools and those areas, is there follow-up testing or reviewing in a year, or when does it see what kind of benefits or what's changed? Is there?
You mean from energy savings?
Yes.
So yeah,
When that's studied again.
at least for facilities, we have a monthly to quarterly review of the data.
Okay.
And we would meet quarterly with our facility staff to review the performance of the buildings. Now, extending this out, because this plan now incorporates a lot of other areas, we'll have to extend that data collection and review to these other areas as well, like fleet and waste and streetlights. I don't think we'll be collecting the data, but there's not too much to be reviewing in terms of lighting performance. But yeah, so we do already do that with one of our divisions, so we hope to extend it. And then, yeah, we strive to be able to quantify those savings through that analysis. It's not always straightforward and not feasible for every single retrofit, but yeah, we do strive to do that kind of analysis.
Anybody on screen have any comments on the report or questions?
Ocean.
Yeah, I didn't bring my glasses, sorry.
No worries. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a long report. Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for generating the report. It's definitely a lot of information to go through. I wanted to clarify, did we actually have information on how much the dog waste diversion program actually diverted? Was there an actual figure, or because it mentions here that we're looking to expand it? I was just curious as to how much waste was actually diverted. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. We didn't collect it for this project specifically, but I believe operations does collect that information because they know, they have a frequency of pickup and a general idea of how much is being picked up or how full the bins are. But it wasn't part of this project because we weren't able to get that granular data to begin with. So going into that level of detail didn't really add anything if the data itself was estimated, you know. So that would be something we would look for the next plan when we update and when we do our waste audit and that kind of information. So I don't have that information, but I believe that operations would be collecting that type of information.
Thank you.
Maybe just follow up. Yeah, okay.
I'd like to add that we're putting in a different kind of dog waste receptacle now, where it's sunk in the ground. And then we have a company that comes by and takes it out, and I'm sure that because they'll probably be charging us by the weight. So as that progresses, we should have a better idea. But a lot of the waste, dog waste, people, they don't put it in the waste receptacles, and part of the problem is because we don't have a lot of waste receptacles throughout the trails. And it raises at council when a resident said that on one of the trails, like people are putting the dog waste in the bags, little bags, and then they're throwing it into the trees. And when somebody finally confronted the person who was doing that, they said, well, you know, this is all biodegradable. But the problem in some areas, and it's certainly true in the dog park, is that if you do that, it biodegrades, but it goes into the ground that feeds into the stream, into the East Holland water system. And so that's not a good thing. So I think there's, Natalie, I think there's some education maybe with Sarah. It has to be like, you know, I don't know exactly what the message is, but residents are actually unknowingly polluting the streams in the areas where they feed into streams. But I think we could do a better job with dog waste. But people would have to cooperate with that. How do you get that? Anyway, all right, thank you for the question. Yes.
I do have a couple of questions and feedback through the chair, if you will. I just want to take this opportunity and say, I think this is a great report. I recognize the amount of work that has gone through for this, and kind of, I haven't had the chance to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, but thanks to the presentation that you provided last month, I feel like I'm not caught unawares with any of the items of what I have read about the report. I think one of the big things is with this data here, I think you guys have done a great job with giving us a snapshot of what is happening here and your best guess with regards to modeling as to what might happen in the future. I find that with modeling in my own practice, it's kind of like all models are wrong, right? The question is just how close are they to what we think where we're going to? So I find that when I'm looking at models, when I'm looking at predictions, some of the things I focus in on is like, I agree with your assumptions, but I'm really interested to know a bit more about the risk of not achieving those assumptions, right? And the idea of how will we know if we are on track or off track, right? I think the worst thing or we don't want to be in a position where in 2050, we get to the scenario and we say, oh, we're off track, oops. And then we go through this process again, new plan, new deadlines, right? And the idea of kind of like monitoring and feedback and target goals and such. I was wondering if you could speak a bit are there any recommendations, any thoughts about how will we know if we're on track? And if we are not on track, what might be some of the things that this report might suggest proactively to get us back on track? Or is it simply just here are the recommendations, if you do the recommendations, we're fine. If we don't fund the recommendations, then, well, obviously we're gonna be off track and that's light. So I'm not sure if you can speak a bit to that, if possible, through the chair.
It's a great question, and appreciate comments on models and doing your best to create models that are robust and have the appropriate amount of flexibility to adapt to the future, which is what we tried our best to do as part of this program. So from a risk standpoint and ensuring that you're tracking towards the goals, there's a number of soft recommendations around auditing and feasibility studies to gain a detailed understanding of some of the most significant individual nodes of this GHG plan or that need to happen. So if that kind of falls off, it's going to be more and more difficult to address some of the larger like facility like SARC we're talking about quite a bit. Like we know SARC is a high priority facility with significant GHG impacts on the entire profile. So if a plan is not established in depth on SARC as an example over the next couple of years, it's going to be difficult to achieve some of the outcomes that have been recommended as part of this. So we are in Natalie is doing great in terms of pushing the data acquisition, so that kind of monthly, quarterly reporting on data on the facilities and fleet side in particular is key to continue to not just acquire, but analyze. So kind of continuous analysis on those and ensuring that when projects are implemented, that we're not, or whoever is not just implementing those and ignoring reviewing the results. So there's, we do make a lot of assumptions around projects are going to happen, and when they happen, these are the results which are going to occur. If there's not an appropriate plan to kind of measure and verify results as projects and measures and retrofits are taking place, then there could be some risk that, hey, we didn't achieve the results that we were expected, but we didn't even know that we didn't achieve them just because we gave ourselves a pat on the back. Hey, we did a project, and we're just going to cascade that more rapidly across a larger portfolio without really ensuring that it happened appropriately. So this plan does have some robustness around kind of addressing certain approaches, like almost like a pilot style approach. Do this building first, make sure the results are happening, and then cascading that those strategies more broadly across other buildings, as an example. So a lot of overall, I would classify some of the risks as low from an assumption perspective with respect to the model. It's really ensuring, like Natalie encouraged through this program, that the stakeholders are engaged and everyone's pulling the chain in the same direction, so that the people that are involved in finance, people that are involved in innovation and taking creative strategy are all part of the program. And like you said, that you're not like occasionally blindsided with a report and no one's seen it in a long time, and then it just makes more questions compared to communication being clear and everyone kind of being in spaces which are collaborative in nature, which allow the results of this to be cascaded into success. So I hope that kind of answers your question a little bit.
No, absolutely. Yeah, through the chair, thank you very much for that. I think listening to your comments, it really resonates with me, the idea that I really like the push for data, but understanding that data as a means towards action as opposed to data towards ends, right? Just because we're doing better at measuring stuff, I think that doesn't guarantee implementation. So I understand, I think it's becoming clear to me how it's like you can have a great plan, but if not implemented, how are you that much better off or not, right? And kind of the flip side, the idea of if you don't measure things, you can't make the assumption that they're happening, right? And kind of seeing how that the two balance together. So no, thank you for those comments. I think I need to reflect a bit more, and I'm putting the cart before the horse here, where I'm jumping towards the implementation. But I know that from your presentation last month, it still resonates with me, the idea that exactly how much power council has, I guess, with some of the policy decisions, right? The idea, the comment that you made, how, well, if we had a policy for net zero buildings, moving forward, the assumptions, the model would continue as is. Theoretically, we could build as many buildings as we wanted to if they were all net zero based on policy. It would not be contributing to increased greenhouse gas effects, and recognizing that power that council has with regards to that policy. Yeah, so no, thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. Through the chair, thank you.
Thank you. So Natalie,
Yes.
how do you plan, or maybe Nancy's manager of engineering. So how do you plan to follow through in light of those comments in the context that the council holds the power? But, with respect to reports, how we're doing and what we need to do better and what money we need to be able to do that. How is that going?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's a great question. As you know, anything outlined in this plan needs to go through our budget approval process. Even if this plan goes to council and it gets endorsed next month, that's not a stamp of approval for all the projects that are outlined there. So all the divisions will have to go and get their pieces approved from the plan. There if those projects do not get approved for whatever reason, and there's always a reason, or there could be a reason, right?
All money.
Right, yeah. So it is a possibility. Then that means a delay, just because a project isn't approved for 1 year doesn't mean it won't be approved for the next year. So there's looking like that as a way of moving these projects forward, that maybe it'll get approved in another year. It's changing the business case potentially to get external funding. And for approval process, I'm gonna lean towards that often it's due to budget, right? That a project wouldn't get approved. So yeah, there's gonna be a lot of pressure on these business cases to look for external funding first and foremost. Some of these projects that are outlined align with the asset renewal. So that's another strategy from this plan, is that it's the most cost efficient when you're at the time of renewal of that piece of equipment to upgrade it to either the higher efficiency or a low carbon version of that equipment. So that's another strategy coming out of this plan, that it leans towards that cost efficiency of these upgrades.
Right.
Currently, there is a lot of external funding available for these types of projects, so utilizing that. And there's a lot of discussion in other municipalities for other ways to fund climate action. We're not the only municipality looking to do this. We're not the only municipality looking for funds on how to fund all of these projects. So there is a lot of discussion about different funding options going around. So I think we're gonna be hearing more and more about it going forward. So something for consideration. But if these projects aren't getting approved and we're not moving forward, there are consequences, obviously, in not meeting short-term targets, medium-term targets, and obviously the long-term targets are gonna suffer.
So are you with Nancy Fleming? Because we have a 10-year capital, basically investment capital plan. So are you and Nancy going to be presenting or asking departments to put together projects that have to go into the 10-year capital plan?
Exactly, so depending on that project and where it's gonna fit with which division, we will work with them to include it in their budgets, asks in their 10-year budget. Also, I will be supporting all the divisions in putting their business cases together, because that's also an important piece to approval. And we have our finance team alongside us this whole time with supporting us for any of the funding side of it, the external funding, and also making sure that everything is in line with our internal processes for approval. And identifying different external funding opportunities.
And we have a capable finance team. Did you have something to add?
Yes, through the chair. The more that you're talking about this, I'm thinking about concepts of like knowledge translation, right? And maybe this is also a question, I guess, maybe for the consultants as well, is I am immediately thinking about, okay, I understand how decisions are made, we can't necessarily have everything, but I'm thinking a checklist of the recommendations and kind of having that monitoring of, okay, here are the recommendations that at this point of time have been adopted, here are the ones that have been deferred, here are the ones that decisions have decided, yeah, thank you, but we're not gonna follow up on that. I'm wondering if there's some type of mechanism, some type of reporting tool that might help facilitate that transparency and bring to light the idea of like, this is a great plan. How close are we to the actual implementation? And if that's something that could be looked at and either, ideally, I'd love for it to go to the public, right? But at a bare minimum, if that's something that could be reported back to this committee as kind of like the representatives for the community.
Great idea, and actually, the more information we can get out to the public, you're talking, transparency, the more, then hopefully the more buy-in we can get, and maybe even the public puts a little pressure.
And through you, Chair, I feel like it's something like the talking header in my head is like, I don't know. If there were like 35 recommendations, I don't know how much the count is, but yeah, 22 out of 35 recommendations have been adopted and are funded at this time. Like that type of key performance indicator, that might be a great talking point to allow people in one glance to say, yeah, we're either on progress, we're really close, or we're falling behind. And I feel like that type of knowledge translation project would be very helpful to myself.
And we could have report minimum once a year. But have we prioritized these? I didn't notice that because, for example, the SARC, if SARC's 50% of the emissions of our facilities, then maybe we prioritize that because we'll get. That would be a really great story if we could reduce that back to, you know. But do we have a priority list?
I don't believe we have it in its current state. We don't have like, you know, this is your number one project, but we do have the 5 years set up to focus first and foremost on that detailed feasibility study. And through that study, they will then prioritize what is the first, and again, that might be a strategy that has to come out of that feasibility study. Do we go to Stark, for example, being 30% of our emissions,
Right.
and go in there and do a full building retrofit on year 2 of that process and retrofit the whole building all at one time? Or that feasibility might say, no, you're, you know, considering that, you know, most cost efficient way is to upgrade as the assets get renewed in a 15 to 20 year time period, right? So that study, part of that study will come up with those kinds of strategies. We didn't go into that level of detail in this analysis. There was actually a scenarios analysis done, Patrick. I don't know if you want to speak to that, where there was an asset renewal retrofitting process that was analyzed up to 2050, comparing to some other strategies. And in the end, I know that what we're presenting is based on the asset renewal strategy, because I think it was the most cost efficient. But there were some other scenarios that were developed. I don't know if you could speak to those.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we looked at like scenarios just as you're describing there, Natalie, where you might go into a facility or multiple facilities and do that full retrofit. So your pros from doing those targeted full scale retrofits of individual facilities, as an example, is you achieve results right away. So compared to trickling results over the years, where it can be a little bit more cost effective because you're never replacing an equipment that isn't at its end of useful life. So the pro on the like full retrofit right away is you see significant results sooner. The overall cost will be a little bit lower from a long-term perspective because there's additional mobilization and escalation, which will happen with that cascading smaller projects over a long period of time. And you can see, like, you're going to see those GHG reduction results, but you can also kind of gain momentum within the community as well, because those are highly visible projects. Hey, we need to have the ice out of these surfaces for a month so we can retrofit here. Hey, we're drilling a geothermal system in the parking lot here. And then you can do more marketing around those projects. So if you're doing a big Stark retrofit, there's a community momentum building aspect when you're doing something large like that. So it is a balance. Like, we did kind of do the most logical kind of cascaded as age of infrastructure needs to be renewed. But in that short-term period where the feasibility studies are going to be completed, there's a detailed evaluation of those different options as well. And like Natalie mentioned, different financial mechanisms are available too. Like the Canada Infrastructure Bank wants to invest in projects like these, and their terms on kind of loans are very advantageous in comparison to what financing you could typically get in the market. And there's lots of other players like Enbridge Sustain or Enwave or others like that who would like to deploy capital to these projects, and then the money moves to the operational side. So there's lots of different models there, but we did kind of look at a few different iterations on scenarios where different strategies were put in place. And we think we've got a reasonable one as part of the ECDMP, but certainly, it can shift and mold over time.
Thank you. I know you have to go to, I didn't add up the costs of everything. I know it's a high level estimate. It'll change when we do more in depth, but do you not have a total of what to do everything that's in the plan? How much it would cost?
We had some costing on the short-term side. We had, I think, around $4 million in the short-term project cost estimate. And that includes a number of things like feasibility studies and then some retrofits at facilities, some decarbonization of fleet. I think we had almost $3 million on the fleet side. Training, performance monitoring, a number of things. So we had
Grand total though. We didn't get that far when we're doing this in segments. Do you have an idea of?
In terms of to achieve net zero?
Well, to achieve what's in the report.
So yeah, we didn't have it's X costs because there's so much variability which presents itself in the medium and long term towards 2050, but it's hard to say off the top of my head. But
Many millions.
Many millions, like anywhere. It depends on the strategy you take, but yeah, I don't know, between 50 and $200 million maybe. I could just estimate. But over a long period of time too, right? Over 25 years. So, you could invest in SARC as an example. That could be a $15 to $25 million retrofit just of SARC as an example. So you can kind of get a bit of a feel of what the long-term cost. I think there's been some publications of some other municipalities where council has adopted overall values of projects. So I think the city of Kitchener had a report around $500 million approved by council or something along those lines to achieve net zero by 2050. So you can start to kind of scale what things are going to take over the next 25 years.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you for not really addressing, but including my concern about space heating in the report. I think that's probably the space heaters. I think that's probably a huge energy drain.
Certainly.
And also I make the comment about where are we gonna get all this energy from? And how reliable is it going to be? So I think we need to do as much alternative energy as possible. Are there any more questions or comments? If you think of anything, you can send it to Natalie.
Yep.
Thank you very much. It's a good report. Appreciate it. Worth the money. I don't know how much we paid you, but worth the money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, Patrick.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So, we'll need a motion to receive this. We're not in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Is that a
sorry.
question?
Ken.
No, sorry, that was the motion to receive.
Thank you, Ken. You know how this works. I need a second, please. Thank you. All those in favor? Okay. Do we have anything else on the agenda? New business. Does anybody have any new business they'd like to address this evening? Don't have anything to do? Goodness. Okay, well, I guess I'll call for an adjournment. We need a mover and a seconder. Who would like to take us out? Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, sir. All those in favor? I just should say that, between now and the time this comes to council, which will be June
4th.
June 4th, which is pretty soon.
Yeah.
If you have, any other comments, to send to Natalie and I may something to raise at the council meeting. That's also possible. Thank you.
Sorry, our next meeting is when?
17th, yeah.
17th.
Yeah, and then after that, it's not until October.
Okay.
Yeah,
Will we get an update about how things went in council or
yeah, we
not
can
necessarily?
provide.
Or
that.
do we just need to tune in?
Yeah, just go on the YouTube.
Well, Natalie, you could provide a small update too.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, actually, it won't be. The way our meeting structure is now, we have a meeting at the beginning of the month. And then we don't have another council meeting till the end of the month. And that council meeting is where things get approved.
Okay, so it's the later one where it gets approved?
Yeah, the
Okay.
second one, yeah.
Okay, fair.
And usually what happens at the committee of the whole. You usually know what's gonna happen, usually doesn't change.
Yeah.
But nothing will be ratified until we have
Thanks, everyone.
the actual. Thank you, everyone.